Don't act surprised, you know exactly what you did.
Is there nothing out of this group of people, there's nothing that you want to know?
Don't stand outside. I'll call you back in when you're actually going to be quiet.
It's Wednesday today and we're halfway through a week spent here at Kings Langley Secondary School in Hertfordshire, where we're conducting an ambitious experiment using cutting-edge science. Leading psychologists, physiologists, neurologists and educationalists will be trialling an intelligent vest, which reveals live stress levels through instant readings of the teacher's heart and breathing rates. We'll also be measuring their levels of cortisol, the fight or flight hormone. Never before in a normal population have scientists tried to establish if your DNA can make you stress-prone, but our team will be attempting just that. And in yet another world first, we'll be monitoring and recording our teachers' blood pressure every 15 minutes throughout the school day, so our experts can pinpoint extra stressful moments. This van is actually an observational hide where myself and experts can monitor the teachers and look into their classrooms. Now, this is an ordinary school in terms of its buildings and its intake, but extraordinary in terms of its aspirations and enthusiasm. But as we know, aspiration can bring stress in its wake.
But I think on the whole I am pretty stressed. I don't mind admitting that. And there are occasions when I notice that through nervousness or sleepless nights. There are times I feel like exploding, and there are times I use up a lot of my capacity to control my temper and my responses.
Well, with me in the hide is Alom Shah. Alom, you've been involved with this idea from the very beginning, haven't you? And who are our guinea pigs today? Who's volunteered?
Two very different teachers. Jeff Shepherd, who's been at the school for I think 20 years, and he teaches geography, business studies and PE. And
wow.
He's a really experienced chap, yeah. And then we've also got Emily Creed, who's only been teaching for 2 years at the school. She's new to teaching. I think we're going to see how they respond to stress and whether it's different depending on how much experience you've got.
And what are you going to be up to today?
I'll be running around observing them in the classroom and collecting cortisol swabs every so often at the end of every lesson. That's a really good indicator of their stress levels.
What are the key science focuses today?
Well, Nadia Wager, who's been with us all week, is going to go into more depth about how her ambulatory blood pressure monitoring system works.
It's just gone 9 AM and the start of the first lesson. Jeff Shepherd this morning is taking a PE lesson first thing, and he's sharing that with another PE teacher, James Dyson. But before we go over and see what's happening, let's see how Jeff sees himself.
I have been here for 20 years. The stress, I would say, as a trend has gone up, but has lessened over the last 3 or 4 years.
I'm quite sure, the same as the rest of us, Jeff gets stressed. He never shows it. I've never known him to have a cross word or a bad word to say about the youngsters or the school. It's the sort of person that you want.
Well, with me to assess Jeff's levels of stress, we have two experts. First of all, Dr Mark Hamer from University College London, a psychophysiologist. Mark, welcome back. You were with us on Monday as well. Now, what the vest is showing us now is that Jeff's heart rate is round about, well, sort of changing between mid-90s up to about 104. I mean, is that just really reflecting him running about in the gym, or could it indicate he's finding this stressful?
Well, I mean, the problem with this is that essentially exercise and stress elicit the same physiological responses, especially in terms of heart rate. So, I mean, it's almost impossible to split up the two, to be honest.
Well, also on the panel today we have Jill Jordan. Jill, welcome to the show. You're a former head teacher and you're now an expert in change. How does change impact on stress?
That depends a lot on whether the person is somebody who embraces change or somebody who fears change. And for people who've been in the job for 20 years, sometimes some of the changes can seem massive and can be very, very challenging.
Now, we haven't seen a great deal of Jeff yet, but he does seem to be enjoying the class. We can see he's laughing there with his students. Jill, what are your first impressions of Jeff as a teacher, just from his body language?
He's relaxed, he's confident, and therefore I would guess that the stress level will only rise if something specific happens, I think, to make it stressful.
Right.
Hold the ball there. Hold the ball there, yeah.
Oh, Jill, we've just seen there both James and Jeff having to deal with one of their pupils who looked like they'd sustained an injury.
Most definitely, and I noticed, interestingly, just before that Jeff was pacing backwards and forwards. He was a little bit more agitated before he went over there, and I did wonder why he was pacing backwards and forwards. And as soon as he went over, we saw that one of the boys had fallen over. So that's the moment where you're not too sure whether everything's okay.
Alan, did you spot anything on the vest? Did you happen to see whether his heart rate gone up? I mean, it's up to over 100 now.
Again, yes, his heart rate did seem to go up around that time.
Well, the other teacher who we are closely monitoring today is Emily Creed, a relatively new arrival at the school. And let's find out a little bit about her.
I'm Emily Creed. I've been at the school just over a year now. I'm a classroom music teacher. I was an NQT last year, so I finished my training this summer. It's always nerve-wracking at the beginning, I think, because you're not really sure what to expect.
Warm up our jaws.
It was lovely that she chose to work at this school because she felt that the atmosphere was appropriate to her and the working environment was going to suit her. She's responded wonderfully well.
I try to give an outward appearance of being laid back, I think. I'm usually quite good at controlling my stress levels. Obviously, because of my subject, I am very, very busy. I have lunchtime clubs. I'm always up at break time supervising the music department as well.
I know where to find Emily every day at lunch break and after school. She'll be in the music rooms and she'll be practising with the junior choir or the senior choir. Absolute 110% commitment. No head teacher could ask for anything more.
Now, what we heard, Mark, she doesn't get many breaks during the day. How's that going to affect her? I mean, surely we all need a break at some point.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think interestingly with new teachers, the demands on them are very high, but the level of control that they have over their work is quite low. Particularly with young teachers, this imbalance between demands and control is actually quite a sort of a dangerous sort of situation. So it's be interesting to look at her today.
Picking up on what Mark was just saying about demands and control, when you watch Jeff, who's been in the job 20 years, looking at him, I get the feeling he's done this type of lesson many times before and is very comfortable with it.
Well, it's just gone 10 a.m. and in the changeover between lessons 1 and 2 here at Kings Langley School, we're joined by third expert, Dr Nadia Wager. She's just popped into Emily's class to wire her up to a mobile blood pressure unit. Having measured Emily and Jeff's blood pressure, we'll find out the results at the end of the programme.
112/44.
Okay guys, if you can take your coats off, get your books out. Today we are going to start with a little bit of a vocal bit, a little bit of scat singing. Dylan. Dylan, don't play up please. Be sensible. Okay, so we are going to start with a little bit of scat singing today. But first of all, to make sure we're all relaxed in the right frame of mind, we're going to do some breathing.
Well, Jill, looking how Emily's beginning her class, I'd say she seemed a little bit nervous. That could just be the cameras in there, but she's a new teacher.
I think for Emily, it's still very much her setting the line, setting the line over which she won't let them step at the moment, which seems very strict, but actually it will serve them hugely in the future.
Right, yes. Well, Nadia, you've rushed round to join us in the van, having just helped Emily into a blood pressure monitor. Can you explain the blood pressure experiment that you're running for us today?
Blood pressure is quite good on judging mood and physiological arousal that's associated with it. And Emily herself, as I was putting on the monitors, said, well, actually, I have quite low blood pressure. Oh, but strangely enough, it wasn't that lower reading on the systolic, possibly because of the cameras, and we're manhandling her, wiring her up, yes, and being observed, and the children are waiting outside, the lesson starting late. So it wasn't actually as low as I think she would have anticipated.
Now, is blood pressure something that can change from minute to minute? Is it quite responsive?
It's very, very responsive. So if you've had quite a strong emotion, something like if something's made you very angry, it will actually take you about 25 minutes for it to actually return to baseline. So it will leave sort of a residue. And if you then think about the anger-provoking event again, unfortunately blood pressure will raise again.
Right, okay. So yeah, it's very responsive by the sounds of things.
Oh, stop. Speeding up. There are people speeding up. This one, go and stand outside. I'll call you back in when you're actually going to be quiet. And tuck that shirt in, I've asked you once already. If I see it out again, it'll be a detention at lunchtime. Right.
Now we saw there Emily having some discipline issues in the class, sending one pupil out because he was being disruptive. Would you expect that?
I would expect that to be a peak, actually, particularly because she's trying to control her anger with him and trying to be professional about it.
Yeah, so on the face of it, she's very calm.
She's very calm, but
dealing
in
with
fact, that's a holding in of anger, which would have sort of the greatest response on blood pressure, really.
And what can be the longer-term effects of having blood pressure going up and down all day?
Well, it's a cumulative damage in the end. So long as it's fine while people are doing it, going up and down, so long as it returns to a recovery position either at the end of the day or during lunch breaks, break times generally. But if it's raised for a length of time, gradually the baseline will actually raise, and so you'll get cumulative damage on the arteries really in the heart.
Well, the class dynamic has certainly changed now. All the pupils are moving around the classroom. Jill, is that something that's more difficult to handle?
It can be. It means the teacher does have to have eyes in the back of her head and she will have to keep moving around. I think, though, where they're doing improvisation and composition like that, they're probably quite engaged.
How regularly is your monitor, Nadia, measuring blood pressure?
It's actually every 15 minutes, so we should get 4 readings really during the lesson time, which is quite nice. I would like to do it more, but I think it'd be too much damage on poor Emily's arm.
Right, yes, you do get that really
quite tight.
Yeah, tight pressure.
So we don't want to wear her out.
No, she's got a long day.
Don't worry about song back, no, rhythm up the top. Right, girls. No, it doesn't matter which one that one's on, it's on the rhythm at the top. Don't worry about pressing them.
Now, one of the things that can really stress out a new teacher is having their teaching practice observed, especially if it's by a stranger. Raka Gaderi, who's from the John Moores University in Liverpool, has popped into the back of Emily's class to watch her teach. Now, Raka is an expert in stress management and helps schools manage their stress. The only thing is we didn't tell Emily that Raka was coming in until just 2 minutes before her class, so that might well have added to her stress.
Liam, come here, please.
Nadia, do you think we might see that impacting on her blood pressure?
Oh, I'd imagine you would. Actually, evaluation apprehension, which is what Emily would be experiencing now, is the biggest stressor that people report, even higher than fear of death.
Right.
So I can imagine her blood pressure actually will be quite high. The good thing is that as she didn't know beforehand, she wouldn't have had all the anticipation and the worry before, but it might have gone high on finding that she'd got her there.
Right.
I'm just going to try and squeeze past you here.
It's quite noisy, isn't it? It's like... Well, breaks finish and Jeff is into his 3rd lesson of the day. He's got his geography teacher hat on now and he's got a class of Year 8s and they're doing a project on Brazil. Nadia, Jeff's still wearing his PE kit. Is that because he's still wired up to your gadgetry?
He is, bless him. We put it on before he started his teaching this morning, but with the vest and the blood pressure monitor, it was all too much. And he said he normally likes to wear a suit for his actual classroom teaching. So I'm just wondering whether he's finding it stressful not in the right attire.
Now, Mark, we're getting readouts from Jeff's vest there, and his heart rate is showing just over 100. Would you expect to see that?
Well, interestingly, I mean, it's fairly similar to the heart rate that we saw this morning when he was doing his PE class. And when we would have thought he's probably moving around a bit more in the PE class than he is at the moment. So he's possibly finding this a little bit more mentally demanding than the PE class.
When you've come out of a lesson, and we don't know how Jeff will feel after this one, but if you're a teacher that comes out of a lesson and feels like, oh, that didn't go very well, it's just going to keep the levels of stress going all the way through the day, isn't it?
I think that happens such a lot in teaching, particularly in a secondary school where you are going from class to class to class, and that's the danger really, that you keep at that higher level of stress and pressure.
As part of our grand experiment this week, we are linking psychological and physiological information in the form of questionnaires and genetic markers in people's DNA. And the man who's been involved in this, Dr Chris Gibbons from Queen's University Belfast. Chris, remind us about what you're doing this week.
Well, what we asked the teachers to do at the end of a busy first term was to identify what for them were their main sources of stress. We also looked at their coping patterns.
We're doing this for the entire teaching staff and some of the support staff, but Jeff is one of the teachers who agreed to waive anonymity. And what did his questionnaire reveal?
Well, Jeff is an amazing case in many ways, not all in good ways. For his negative coping, he was markedly high on all measures of negative coping.
And what kind of measures are they? What do you mean by negative coping?
Well, such as bottling up issues or emotions, and in Jeff's case, he was very strong in terms of denial, not recognising perhaps that there were issues or problems he needed to deal with. Right. Now, what we also see is on the positive coping strategies is that ways in which we tend to deal with that is by tapping into good support networks. People who may be able to offer us advice, or people who may be able to offer us some kind of emotional support. In Jeff's case, he's very low on seeking that kind of support. Now, it may be because he's a man, it may be because of his personality, it may be that he just doesn't feel able to express this.
Alan, you're sitting there quietly. Tell us, it wasn't just questionnaires that you encouraged the whole school to do. What else did you do with the teachers and support staff?
Well, lots of scientists were really excited to take part in this project, including a colleague of Chris's who'd already seen that there was a genotype associated with anxiety and depression. And so we've taken DNA samples from all our teachers, and we're looking for this genotype to see if there's an association with stress as well.
Okay, to see if they've got a propensity towards stress. And Chris, reveal Jeff's genotype.
Well, Jeff's genotype, actually, he has the hardy anxious resistant genotype. He is the CC type, which would indicate that in our other populations that they're unlikely to experience anxiety. And that seems at odds with the fact that we find with Jeff and his profile that he is at risk in terms of emotional exhaustion. He does worry a lot, he does find it difficult to concentrate, and he is high on psychological ill health. So there is some circles that need to be squared there in Jeff's case. And my interpretation in this case is that it may be that this anxious resistant genotype may well lull Jeff into thinking that he is in control and that he doesn't need maybe to go to the lengths that other people go to who have a more anxious disposition. And as a result, he may not actually cope as well. Hence we see this high scoring on the negative coping and the low scoring on the positive side.
Well, Chris, Emily, another one of our volunteer teachers, we've looked at a questionnaire for her and her DNA. She's waived her anonymity. What did her results reveal? Again,
very, very interesting results, and in many ways polar opposite to Jeff's.
Really?
What we find with Emily is that she has a very good range of positive coping strategies. She's making good use of different support networks, and by that it's tapping into people who could give her advice and information, that kind of support. To her credit, she's also very confident about getting off her chest the issues that are to do with the sources of stress she experiences at work. And on the negative side, where we see a negative, it's the one I've mentioned before, which is she's slightly high on self-blame. And if I was a manager in a school, I would not be at all disappointed to have teachers who are high in self-blame, because it indicates that they are taking responsibility for their students' learning, and they're going the extra mile to try and make sure, being very conscientious, to make sure that they provide the very best they can for their students. What we're finding in Emily's case is that she's putting a lot of time and effort into that preparation.
Well, it's just gone 12:20, the beginning of the third lesson at Kings Langley School, and Emily, for once, has a free period. So we've asked Raka, our expert in stress management, to pop in and see Emily in the music room and give her some tips.
So how did you think that lesson went?
It was a bit manic today. I think a combination of Obviously film crews and snow has excited them a little bit.
But there was quite a loud level of noise, wasn't there, in the classroom? Is it usually that noisy? Or?
Often.
Often?
Often, it varies.
So do you use any kind of breathing techniques at all when you find yourself getting a bit stressed?
If I find myself getting annoyed or getting a bit shaky or tense or nervous about something, if you take like a really, really deep breath in, I find it does have a calming effect on me. It kind of, even though it's just for a couple of split seconds, it will calm me down, but often that's enough to really get me going.
Well, there's two things that you can do instantly. But I mean, there's one technique which people use in yoga a lot, which is like breathing in for the count of 4 and then breathing out for the count of 8, and doing that about 3 times if you can. It doesn't take very long, but it actually completely slows down, you know, any responses that you have, and it calms you down. Also, if you practice seeing an image of yourself being supremely calm and in control, you know, when you close your eyes, if you practice visualising that image, then you can recall that when you need to be calm.
Mark, Emily's just sitting down there, but I've noticed from her vest that her heart rate reading is actually quite high.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been looking at it for the last 5 minutes while she was in this conversation, and it's around about 100, which, given, you know, she's young and healthy, its resting heart rate should be around about 70 beats per minute. So she's really, I mean, this is a real definite stress indicator, I think.
Now, we all know what Jamie Oliver has done for school dinners, but what do their busy teachers eat? Well, we asked volunteer teacher Liz Shipp to keep a food diary for 4 days. And we've asked nutritionist Sally Gordon to meet Liz and tell her what's important about nutrition and how it can help her handle stress.
OK, Liz, well, thank you very much for preparing your food diary for me.
Yeah.
I need to know everything that passes their lips, basically. Breakfast, lunch, supper, snacks, sweeties. Now, what we do at the beginning of the day can often determine our energy levels and how we're going to feel at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know where this is going.
I know where this is going. I don't have breakfast.
You don't have any breakfast. In fact, you don't actually eat anything until 12:30.
The reason why I don't have something first thing in the morning is it makes me feel sort of nauseous.
I think teachers have a very difficult job, and from what I understand, they're often eating on the run. They have their break times that are very busy. Often they're working during lunch times as well. So they tend to take quick fixes. Could you think about having at break time a piece of fruit?
Yeah.
And just a small handful of unsalted nuts, maybe almonds, because then you're getting some carbohydrate and you're getting lots of protein as well.
Right.
A bit of essential fats thrown in. Your lunchtime menus, you eat here?
Yes. Sometimes feel that they're quite high in carbohydrate.
Absolutely.
And I fall down into that pattern because I like my pastry and I like my potatoes and I like my baked beans.
And also, don't forget, you're not having any breakfast, so by the time you get to lunch, that's what you are craving.
Yeah.
You need some omega-3s, and I don't actually see any in your diet. Right.
I suppose the only fish that we get is tuna because that's oily. So.
Is that fresh tuna?
No, tinned.
Tinned tuna.
Yeah. In a pasta bake. I thought I looked quite good on paper, apart from the Ribena obsession, and now I'm sort of worried slightly.
Nadia has just popped in to check on our volunteers' blood pressure. We'll find out their results at the end of the programme. Looks like there's been some surprising data already for Emily.
We'd like to sit back to here. At 11 o'clock, was that break?
That was when I was calling parent.
Ah, there you go. But that's really interesting, how high it can go at that point, in comparison to what you were when we first started, which is, it sounds like it's more like your normal blood pressure.
I believe Alom's out and about taking some more samples for the cortisol experiment.
If you're collecting spit, you're doing real science.
Thank you.
Enjoying that?
I'm loving it.
And what's it like being filmed and stuff? Do you think that's kind of adding to your levels of stress?
A bit. It's just, I don't know, I can't kind of relax how I normally would.
Well, it's 2:30. We're back after lunch with Emily, and she's teaching Year 9s all about rhythm. Nadia, what have you discovered about Emily's blood pressure throughout the day?
Well, she started off by saying to me how she has very low blood pressure, and in fact when we put the monitor on this morning we got an initial very low reading, but there was also a point where it went exceptionally high, and when I showed Emily, she actually said, oh, that's at the point she had to phone a parent. So actually having to sort of have this communication with a parent, and I suppose it's not the unexpected yet again. It was, quite shocking actually.
I think you told me the levels are actually that you showed me were actually similar to what someone with hypertension, which is clinically elevated blood pressure, and they were really astonishing, weren't they? It's incredible.
So I think we had, when we had put her under quite a bit of stress, not only with the cameras and all the equipment on, and you observing, I think was mostly too much, and then having to deal with the parent on top.
Right, it was just...
But luckily it had come down again afterwards, but I think it was obviously quite a stressful morning for her. And so it's lovely to see her now looking so relaxed.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's accurate, but the heart rate now is it's about 145, which is, if that is a true reflection, that's astonishingly high, because that's the sort of levels you would see during exercise, to be honest, quite vigorous exercise.
But we're getting a clean readout on the ECG, so that makes me think that it is accurate.
Exactly, it looks like a good ECG, so...
Gosh, so I wonder what's happening.
Looking at her pulse rate actually earlier on my printer, that was incredibly high, so it did actually correspond with what we're seeing.
It matches.
So maybe not as relaxed as we thought then this afternoon.
Anthony, look at your shirts, wow, what's the state with you? Okay, so you work on your soloist lesson and fit it in with what these guys are doing, okay? That's what I want you to...
I mean, Mark, we've seen that in her vest all day, high heart rate.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's actually been quite scary. Emily's a healthy young lady, and we've seen some really quite huge physiological responses, so...
Teaching really could be as stressful as everyone makes out. I think we're seeing it for real here. Nadia, what about you?
Teaching is notoriously bad for people developing cancer and heart disease and diabetes, which are all sort of stress-related illnesses. And actually, having seen Emily's readouts today, both on heart rate and blood pressure,
it is something that teachers really need to be made aware of. So let's reveal the results of the blood pressure readings. Emily has told us that she usually has low blood pressure, but at one point hers went up to 183/138. That's hypertension level. Jeff's was less up and down, but fairly consistently too high for comfort. Both vests also show major fluctuations in heart rate. Tomorrow we'll have their cortisol results, which will complete our investigation into their stress levels.